All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for the Tulane School of Professional Advancement Financial Aid webinar for undergraduates. We'll go on to introductions. My name is Vanessa Rodriguez, and I am the Assistant Dean for Student Support and Success at Tulane SoPA. We like to call it SoPA for short. And then I'll let Chantrella introduce herself.
Trying to get this off. Hello, everyone. My name is Chantrella Baptiste. I'm a senior financial aid counselor here at Tulane University, and I'm also a graduate of the master's program for the School of Professional Advancement, or SoPA. So welcome, and thank you all for taking your time out and listening to this presentation.
All right, so as we go forward, I just want to make sure you guys know that if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that. And of course, we'll save time for questions at the end. So please don't be afraid to speak up. So today we're going to go over, it's kind of like the top 10 hits of what you need to know about financial aid when you're applying. So first, we're going to discuss how to figure out who your financial aid counselor is. Then we'll go to how to complete the FAFSA, which is the Federal Financial Aid Form. Want to notify you guys about the SoPA Addendum to the FAFSA, which is really important. We're going to talk about dates, Pell Grants, and then we'll get into the particulars with some loan limit information and satisfactory academic progress, which is really important stuff to know. And then we'll talk about how enrollment changes might affect your financial aid. And then finally, we'll end it with a SoPA undergraduate checklist that kind of has step-by-step everything that you need to kind of make sure you have done to get your financial aid going. All right. So, Chantrella, every student has their own financial aid counselor. Is that true?
Yes, every student, it's assigned according to the last name of the student. And because we have so many students, it's broken down by each individual, almost like alphabet of your last name for each student. And you can find that information on our website where you can find it under Undergraduate and Meet Us. And you would find your financial aid counselor according to your last name.
That's great. And this is the person that you would contact with any questions, et cetera, right?
Right. Any questions that you have about your financial aid, anything from beginning to end after you thinking about graduating. So yes, this is the person you would contact.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So the FAFSA, that's a big word. You hear it all the time.
Yes.
How do you complete it? Why is it important?
Yes, that acronym is something to pronounce. The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. And what that application does, it opens up doors for students to be considered for different types of federal aid. The federal government has its own website for it. And so you go to studentaid.gov because that website has changed. It was FAFSA.ed.gov, which is free application for federal student aid. Do know that it is free, so you shouldn't pay for it. It is available every October 1st for the upcoming year. So for right now, as we know, it's now October 13th. So the new application for 2021-2022 school year has been released. That's a lot to say, right? And so you definitely want to make sure you put Tulane University as the school. And we do have our school code. I do apologize for that error. It's actually 002029. Is our school code. And so you definitely want to make sure that you put us down so that we can get your application, and we'll start reviewing information for the upcoming year as early as the summer of next year. So the priority deadline is April 15th to have it completed by, so that way you're not behind the curve.
Great. Yeah, I've done the FAFSA, and once you get through it, it's good. It does take a little bit of time, but it's not terribly horrible. And the result is great because you get qualified for federal financial aid, hopefully. All right, let's keep going. So in addition to the FAFSA, there's something called the SoPA Addendum, which is really important. And tell us what it is. Tell us why it's important to fill out, please.
Yes, in addition to the FAFSA, we do have internal forms that students would need to complete. The most important one, or the first one, would be the addendum. The SoPA addendum, either for undergrad or graduate students, but in this case, it'll be undergraduate. In addition to the FAFSA, you want to make sure that you complete that form. And what it does is it allows us to collect information regarding how many hours you plan on attending for fall and spring, because those play a factor. Those two components play a factor in the amount of aid that you can be offered. We also ask on that form whether or not you're receiving any additional funding from outside resources, because that type of aid as well impacts what we can offer you. And that application is online, so it's right at your fingertips, and it's on our website as well. And you want to complete that by April 15th. Granted, the amount of hours you may enroll may change, but at least we'll have an idea of what you are intending to study and how many hours you're thinking about enrolling for each semester.
That's great. Thank you. All right, moving forward. So let's talk about dates. When should people apply? I know that, some people are planning to apply to start in the spring, and some people are planning to start in the fall. So are there differences in dates? Tell us about that.
Yes, that's a really good question, because dates with financial aid are very important. If you're planning on attending for the summer even, that addendum is available April 15th. Every year you want to complete it, as well as the FAFSA by April 15th. If you plan on attending for the fall, April 15th. And the reason why we continue to use that date, although the FAFSA is now available sooner, is because it kind of gives you an idea of when your taxes are due. Hey, just a remembrance, if you're going to attend school, April 15th deadline. So we wanted to continue on with that annual date, just to kind of keep a reminder out there for our students.
All right, thank you. Okay, so after you submit all of the information, now we'll go over a little bit about the SoPA checklist later. So making sure you submit all of your FAFSA, the SoPA addendum. There are other things that you have to do to make sure everything really goes through before they get notified, right? So walk us through things, because that's important.
Right. So now we get into more specific information. You have the FAFSA, you've done the addendum, and you're like, okay, where do I know? How will I know? What's my next step? Well, we have that information. Once you become a student, you'll have access to the Tulane Gibson portal. And that's how we notify our students electronically. We don't send anything by mail because it's not as quick as us being able to send it electronically. So you'll have to be admitted to the university so that you can gain access to the Gibson portal. And once you have access to the Gibson portal, you can see anything that we may need from you, any documents, and you'll also be able to see your award package. And your package, is your form of aid for the academic year. And you'll see that information on your Gibson portal. And also, in addition to any other information that we may need, if we are offering you student loans and you decide to borrow, we have the steps that you'll need to complete in order to ensure that we receive that federal loan money. And that would be the entrance counseling and the master promissory note with the federal government, who is also over the FAFSA. They also be responsible for those two steps, but you can gain access to that website through your Gibson portal. And also we tell you when your aid is going to be dispersed from the federal government to our office, then from our office to the accounts receivable department, which is responsible for your tuition and fees.
That's right. So that Tulane email address is really, really important. Check your Tulane emails and use it frequently, because that's also what's going to get you into that Gibson system. Thank you. So we had a question I wanted to clarify. So if somebody's planning on applying, or if somebody is applying to start this next spring, so like this January, the deadline for FAFSA and submitting that information, if they just started applying, when should that get in to you?
Good. That's a good question. For the spring semester, you want to try to have everything done by November 15th. So I do apologize. So for the spring, you want to get everything done as early as, you can do it as early as April prior to your spring. But if you're kind of deciding maybe by the end of summer, like, hey, I'm going to go for the next spring, you want to have everything done by that November prior to that spring semester that begins in January. So make that deadline maybe October 15th or November 15th. So kind of those 2 dates. Definitely by November 15th, you want to have everything done so that you can have an idea and be mindful of everything prior to the holiday before you get, intertwined with your families and everything. You want to make sure that you have school together. So definitely by November 15th, you want to have everything done.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So moving forward, we talked about when the notifications are sent. Can you talk to us about refunds? This is something that we often get questions about. So how do people find out about them? How do people get them released?
Great. Okay, so I'll give a little bit of information about that. But again, you definitely want to make sure you keep in contact with our accounts receivable department. But most importantly, check your Gibson portal, because that's where all of the information, the vital information is. So once you have done everything, you've made your acceptance of your aid, and you notice that you've accepted more aid than your tuition and fees. So it then creates a refund or an excess credit. So how you can obtain that money, you want to set up direct deposit. That's also through your Gibson online portal. Generally, it's 1 to 3 business days after we receive the funding and release it to accounts receivable, which you can see all of that through your Gibson. It's about 1 to 3 business days we were informed by accounts receivable that it would normally take. And if you should have any questions about it or any issues or you're not quite understanding, you can always contact that department and they'd be able to assist you further. But definitely through your Gibson portal, everything can be set up.
Awesome. Thank you. And then we have that 2-lane email account. Check it, check it, check it. I can't tell you.
Yes.
Often enough, guys, it's really important that you check that email account because important information will be coming through. All right, moving forward. Thanks, Chantrella. So Pell Grants, federal Pell Grants are huge for undergraduates. Please talk us through what those are and how they can help.
Yes. So now we're breaking down, or we're going more into depth on the types of financial aid or federal aid that you can be offered when you're completing the FAFSA form or the free application for federal student aid. One of the forms of aid is the federal Pell Grant. And the federal Pell Grant, the government determines eligibility, and it is based upon enrollment. So it goes back to that addendum form. You kind of want to make sure that you're as accurate as possible when you're giving us information on how many hours you're going to be enrolled, because that plays a factor along with everything that you reported on a FAFSA. It plays a factor in what you can be awarded. So Pell Grant is one of them. And students have the opportunity to receive up to 600% of Pell Grant. Granted, every year your eligibility is going to be determined by your completion of the FAFSA, but up to 600% or 6 years is the equivalency that you can have for that federal Pell Grant. And again, your enrollment level and your expected family contribution number, that number that's going to be calculated based on what you put on the FAFSA is going to determine how much, and your enrollment is going to determine, what you can receive of that.
Great, thank you. All right, moving on. So let's talk about loan limits, and this is specifically for undergraduate, because I know graduate is a whole different thing. So let's talk about federal loan limits for undergrads.
Yes. And federal loans, again, that's another form of aid in addition to the federal Pell Grant that our undergraduates can receive. Again, as stated, it is different from the amount that you can receive as a maximum for graduate students. For undergraduate, it depends on whether or not you're classified as a dependent student or independent student. And FAFSA is what you put on a FAFSA determines that. And the maximum amount in subsidized Stafford loan, which is the one that does not accrue interest while you're in school, is up to $23,000. That's both for a dependent student and an independent student. The maximum and unsubsidized Stafford loan for a dependent student is $8,000, and the maximum for an independent student is $34,500. So you see the difference in the amounts. The government has it set up that way is because they want to minimize how much a dependent student can borrow, because they're looking at your parents' income and asset information to determine eligibility. So they want to kind of minimize how much an undergraduate that's a dependent student can borrow due to responsibility. So an independent can borrow a little bit more than the a dependent student, and their limit is $57,500. And that's for, when we say aggregate, that's for the total time frame of your undergraduate career.
All right, yeah, so to be clear, so that's from when you start to when you finish with your bachelor's.
Correct.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you. Moving forward, so this is an important thing. So once you get your federal financial aid and it's dispersed, that's not the end of the story necessarily. There's this thing called satisfactory academic progress that can affect if you continue to be eligible for the same types of loans. So please talk us through that, because this is important stuff.
Yes, this part is very important because there is, just like what you have with scholarships, with federal aid, there are academic requirements that must be met each time to retain eligibility for it. So while the FAFSA may indicate that you're financially eligible, it is up to you and your academic performance that determines continuous academic eligibility. So when we say satisfactory academic progress, it's based upon a number of things. There are three important things or important components to that policy. We review students every year to determine eligibility. So you must take in consideration the degree that you're seeking. So it's the amount of hours that you've attempted versus how many you've actually completed. And then there's also a minimum GPA that's required as well, depending on what program you're in, if you're seeking a certificate versus if you're seeking your bachelor's degree. On average, it's a 2.0 GPA cumulative that must be met. And as far as the amount of hours, again, you want to complete at least 67% of all of the hours that you've attempted from the time that you actually enroll in classes. We include all of those hours. So even if on the academic side you withdraw from that course and did not receive a failure grade, the W's do count. The unofficial withdrawals count. Any F's, unfortunately, you may have failed the course, those count, as well as the passing grades. So every individual course that you take or attempt matters. So it's very important to pay close attention, when you are registering for classes and completing those hours. And it goes from the fall semester through the summer semester. So no semester is exempt.
Great, thank you so much. That's important to remember. Now, you were talking about kind of the GPAs versus attempted hours. Here's some examples. Can you talk through those for us, please?
Right. So this is one of them. Like I said, again, there are three components. One of the components is your cumulative grade point average. So if you're seeking a certificate, 30 hours or less, your minimum GPA is a 1.75 cumulative. If you're seeking, if you're in between 30 to 48 hours that you've attempted thus far. And again, remember, attempted does not mean what you've passed. It also includes anything that you register for and you begin attendance. Even if you decided that you're not going to attend the first day of class, because that course is registered, that is considered attempted hours. So if you've attempted between 30 and 48 credit hours, your GPA minimum needs to be cumulative of 1.85. And then if you're 48 hours or more, then you need to have a 2.0 cumulative GPA.
Now, just to clarify, so if somebody drops a class and changes a class at that, like right at the beginning where Tulane allows that period of time when people can change classes without any, now, does that affect that, or is that?
That's a good one, because that's often where students kind of get the hiccup. If you're switching out a course, it's okay. But when you are dropping off that course, even if that first week it's allowed on, or say on the academic side, to be done. For financial aid, if you drop that course, it's still going to count. So
Okay,
you
that's
might
important.
that, because we're talking the first day of class. So not the period before the semester begins, but that first day of class, everything that you do does count. Now, if you're switching out because one course doesn't work for you, it's okay. But the dropping and not getting those hours, it does affect you.
All right. So let's talk about the next two elements that are considered in the SAP: quantitative completion rate and quantitative maximum time. All right,
Great.
it's complicated, but hopefully you can make it a little clear.
Yes, very clear, very simple. Again, these are the two other components. Again, as I explained, you want to be mindful of the hours that you attempt versus how many you actually complete. So you need to have, it says 66%, but it's more like 67% because it's like 66.6. How, for example, can a student obtain that or mess that up? Example, if you attempt 12 hours in the fall and you've only completed 6 hours, okay, that's 50%. So already you're at the 50% mark. You attempt in the spring another 12 hours. That's a total of 24 credit hours attempted, but you've only completed another 6 in the spring. At the end of that spring, when we evaluate your eligibility, most likely you won't meet the criteria because you've only completed 50% of the 100%. So you've only completed 12 of the 24 credit hours. So you would be deemed what we consider SAP'd, because you won't be meeting the 66 or 67% completion ratio. So that's just how simple and how easy you can be impacted by the quantitative completion rate requirement. So you may have a 2.0 or a 3.0, but you've been SAP'd because quantitatively, you did not complete that 67% completion ratio. So that's just as easy and how simple it can happen.
All right, so going into the maximum time element.
Right. So just like I indicated previously that the Pell Grant has a 600% time frame, or 6 years, we're still looking at every single year. So when we say 150%, this is basically looking at your degree or the program that you're enrolling in. That program may require a certain amount of hours, maybe 60 credit hours total for that program, or maybe 180 hours, 120 hours for that bachelor's degree program. Well, with 150%, the government gives you, it is more like 180 hours you can attempt to get that degree. Although your degree may need 120, every so often you may decide, okay, I like this class, or I'm going to register or major in this, or change your major. Do keep in mind, it's only so many credit hours that you're allowed. And if your degree program is 120 credit hours to get your bachelor's, you're giving up to 180 to make or break, give or take. So that's what that 150% is. So if your program is 60 credit hours, then you want to look at it still at 150%. So be mindful, because you could max out how many hours you can attempt, not complete, but attempt. So just be mindful of the hours you're registering for it, because this progress is often how students can be impacted from not meeting or receiving federal financial aid.
No, that's important, especially when people change majors. I changed my major when I was in college. It's not an uncommon thing.
Right.
You know, working with your academic advisors, they can really help you make good decisions about
Right.
what classes to take and when, and starting out with like the core curriculum that can be applicable to a whole bunch of different majors.
Right.
So yeah.
Yes, I was definitely there myself in my undergrad. I decided I was going to do 2 majors or then 2 minors, and I was like, oh no, I decided not to. So yeah, it's easy to happen. So just be mindful and always stay in contact with your academic advisors when necessary.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. So you said the word SAT. That sounds sad. We don't want to be SAT, but if it happens, it's not the end of the world. What are the options if that happens? somebody.
It's definitely not the end. So what happens is like I said before with the example I gave, if you in your fall semester attempt 12 hours and only complete 6, you're automatically going to be placed on what we consider a warning. And it's just to say, hey, we see that you're not quite there yet. So you'll be given the opportunity that spring to make it better. So say, for example, again, as the example I gave, you still didn't quite get it. You're at 50% completion ratio at the end of the spring, and you're told you're not going to receive federal financial aid. Well, students are given a opportunity to appeal and just basically explain your case on what may have happened, any personal things that may have affected or impacted your ability to complete the credit hours that you've attempted. So this will be your opportunity to let your financial aid counselor and the committee know what has transpired. And in turn, we'll review that information and determine if you can receive federal financial aid, at least on a probationary period until you get to the level that you need to get to. And if you're approved for such, we'll tell you what you need to do in order to continue to get back up to that successful academic standard.
Great, thanks. No, there's so much going on outside of university studies nowadays. So I'm very glad that this appeal process is available, because there's some really real challenges students face outside of school. So that's great.
Yes.
All right, so continuing forward, we talked a little bit about how enrollment changes can affect attempted hours and things like that, but how does it affect the numbers of financial aid?
Okay, so when you're dropping courses, you want to at first let us know. Speak to your financial aid counselor, touch bases with us, and let us know that you're thinking about dropping a course and you want to know how it's going to impact your financial aid. You want to keep in mind that anytime you drop a course, remember, we're awarding you based on your indication of how many hours you're going to enroll. So if you decide that you're going to drop, most times your financial aid does have to be adjusted to the amount of hours that you're enrolling. And sometimes it could be that you're no longer eligible based upon the information you provided on the FAFSA and the amount of hours that you're actually going to be enrolled. So just keep in mind, anytime that you're thinking about dropping a course, or you're thinking that maybe full-time is not for you at this time, you just want to keep in mind that that can change, as well as impacting your billing. So what the accounts receivable department decides to bill you does change as well, because again, you're going from part-time to full-time or even half-time. So that enrollment status does impact your financial aid. So just keep in mind of that information, and do keep us abreast as your financial aid counselor so that we can know how to help you.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, continuing forward. So this is a lot of steps for somebody who's never done this before. You know, we're not all like you and know this like the back of our hand. Tell us about this checklist and how it can help.
Yes, this was something that we really take pride in. It's the School of Professional Advancement checklist for undergraduate students. And what it does is it kind of comprises everything that I kind of went over in this presentation, and it kind of gives you step by step on what your next step is to do. So you'll always have it at your fingertips, what we've gone over, and it kind of guides you to the end almost of the financial aid process and what to look out for the next year and the new year that comes up, so that you can always be on time, meeting the deadlines that we set, and have everything academically and financially together.
Great, thank you. And it's always available online. So if you have questions, please don't hesitate to contact Chantrella's office in our admissions office. Our executive director, Sheila Gold, loves to talk to students, and she and her assistants, Alvin and Ann, are always happy to speak to anybody. Are there any questions now that anybody would like to put into the chat or unmute themselves and ask before we go? We let Chantrella go eat lunch or something? We're good. Okay. All right. Well, please don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you, Chantrella, so much for sharing your time. We love seeing our graduates doing so well, and We hope to see you guys, you students, in classes, either virtually or in person soon.
Yes.
Take
Thank
care,
you.
everybody. Thanks.
Thank
Thank you.
Bye.
you.